All right, good morning. This is Jeff Orrock here at the National Weather Service office in Wakefield. I'm going to kind of go through some of the latest, talking about the coastal storm, nor'easter that's been developing here off the Carolina coast. We've been really trying to work through quite a bit of a few things this morning, trying to figure out how this thing's going to play out. Some of the things we're starting to adjust in the forecast based on the most recent trends. So we'll kind of just get right on into it and kind of talk about what's going on. I'm going to skip the title slides here and just it's a very complex pattern. It's kind of been a little bit troublesome where we do have this area of low pressure that's forming here really southeast of Wilmington. And the system's becoming what we call occluded. It's getting wrapped up in the upper level parts of the atmosphere. The whole low system is becoming very vertically stacked. And what's happening now that it's doing that is that it's really keeping the low pressure system from moving to the north. And if I just show the current loop here of the radar, I had the fronts on here too. Let me see if the front's turned off. Turn the fronts back on. There you go. You see this area of low pressure that's sitting here southeast of Wilmington. So the system has formed. It did what it was supposed to. It's been deepening where it was supposed to deepen. The problem is it's become what we call occluded. That's why you see this purple looking like occluded front kind of coming back here to the low pressure system. And so what that means is the system is not lifting up the coast, moving to the northeast like we originally anticipated. And so that has caused a little bit of change in our wind forecast, some adjustments. The precipitation seems to be working out pretty well. It's been shifting north, moving up the eastern shore, with most of the rest of us getting a break in the steady rain. It's going to be a lot of heavy mist and light rain here for quite some time. If I zoom in, you kind of see how it's kind of all this little light blue and greens filling in. That's probably mostly heavy mist and some light rain. And there may be even some mist here at the coast that we're not seeing because it's below the radar beam. What's going to end up happening is just where you see this triple point and this elongated trough of low pressure, another area of low pressure is going to form somewhere here off the Virginia coast, and it's going to slowly lift up off the Delmarva coast and kind of sit out here. And when that happens, the winds will continue to increase a little bit for us, but I don't know if we're going to see the intensity of the winds as far as those, potential gusts to 55 to 60 that we were worried about. For that to happen, we needed this low here to kind of lift up to the north. And like I said, it's just not doing it. It's just hanging out down there. And if I look at the satellite image going on, it's a nice, well-defined area with low pressure. I mean, it's sitting here spinning pretty good. It might be slowly drifting to the north a little bit. Notice how it is kind of oval looking. It's almost like it's elongated here a little bit. And you kind of see how that frontal boundary extends to the northeast of it. Even in the cloud cover, you can kind of tell that really well. So it's there. It's just not necessarily doing what it looked like it was going to do earlier. So what that's doing with our winds, I'll kind of just go from north to south. These winds are in miles an hour. There are some pretty good winds out there. I mean, Fenwick Island offshore is gust about 47 miles an hour. Different places here along the Ocean City oceanfront, 35 miles an hour, gust to 44. Even getting some decent winds here in the bay. You're getting gusts close to 40. Tangier Island out here has been gusting close to about almost 36 to 40 miles an hour. Moving on down the bay here a little bit, get into the lower bay. And we've been seeing the winds have picked up. Offshore is gusting close to 50 miles per hour at the Chess Light Tower, Bay Bridge Tunnel, gusting up to about 45, Cape Henry about the same, here at Lynn Haven. So you're seeing some good winds, a lot of winds, pretty solidly gusting to around 40 to 45 miles an hour, depending on where you are. And so that's kind of as expected. The wind's generally out of the east, so that's driving the water in the Chesapeake Bay. We got about 11 to 12 foot seas out here. So the tides right now seem to be behaving. We'll come back to that. Keeping on moving on down the coast here. I'm going to get down into North Carolina. You see out here near Corova, getting gusted in the mid 40s, and even down here in the Alligator River. Everybody's gusting anywhere between, I'd say, 35 to 45 miles an hour, with a few folks, a little bit stronger. Even back here towards Edenton, getting some winds of close to 40 miles an hour. So, the system's there. We just don't have any of the really intense winds. Even if I go down here around the low pressure system itself, you notice the winds aren't a lot stronger. Still just, winds around, gusting around 30, 38 to, let's say, almost 50 miles per hour down here around the low pressure system itself. And so, we're expecting the winds to maybe increase a little bit, but we have been changing some of our headlines because of that. So we'll come back to that here in a second. Notice how this area of low pressure is going to kind of congeal and then kind of come together off the Delmarva. And so that's going to keep conditions breezy through tonight even into tomorrow with that north and northwest wind with that low pressure system setting off the Delmarva. And then everything does start to kick out by Tuesday and things should start to improve. And then we get another cold front coming through Tuesday night and Wednesday. This next cold front blasts through, get another big blast of north wind behind that. That's just a good old fashioned cold front. And then high pressure does start to try to build in for late Thursday and Friday. And honestly, we could be seeing some of our first frosts inland, especially well in the Piedmont, come Friday morning with this cold high pressure building down. So that may be the next newsmaker is just some really cold temperatures coming for late this week. Risk of heavy rain and flash flooding is basically, has ended. There's some lingering, light rain and showers. Some folks might pick up about maybe a tenth to a quarter of an inch. Maybe some places here on the bay might. I think a half inch is going to be a little optimistic. Where we have maybe the best chance for getting some rainfall accumulations of a half inch or so might be here on the Maryland Eastern Shore. But that's really about it. Mostly just this kind of annoying heavy mist and light rain, and that does kind of continue through the day. You see the chances of precipitation, through noon, still about anywhere from 50 to 80%, but those chances do start to become more, I call them high chances, anywhere from 45 to maybe 50% chance of that light rain and mist, from about 6 p.m. to 9. And that does linger a little bit into Monday here, but to definitely see the chances of precipitation decreasing. The exceptions are going to be like Ocean City, where, with that low being right offshore, those chances of rain may continue on through a good bit of the day tomorrow. Same thing for Salisbury up there, just because that low is sitting right there, that northeast wind going to continue to maybe pump in some of that light rain and mist, pretty much for most of the day tomorrow. So pretty dreary, even up here in Cambridge on the Eastern Shore. The rest of us is just going to be, just tapering down and maybe some light rain and drizzle mostly for today. Wind-wise, we're in the process of updating this right now. So the slide will change for this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and drop the high wind warnings. I don't think we're going to see those wind gusts of 55 to 60. So we're going to drop the wind warnings for the coast and have everybody in the wind advisory, because we're still going to see gusts maybe, in the mid 40s, could even see a gust of 50 still. Without, because the winds are going to increase a little bit, but we're not going to have the high winds that we were thinking. So the high wind warnings will be coming down and will be replaced by wind advisories. And we're going to leave the wind advisories up everywhere else that we have wind advisories right now, because it is still going to be windy for the rest of today. Notice the biggest risk for wind is today. Still a little bit breezy, maybe tomorrow, especially at Bay areas and along the coast, but not nearly as windy as what it is today. This was as of this morning, and we did kind of tweak the winds a little bit. So we decreased the winds just some this morning. So you don't see too many wind gusts above 50, except maybe here at Corolla, right along the immediate coast. Here at Ocean City, we had some gusts in the 50s. We're starting to kind of maybe bring those down a little bit and keeping the wind gusts, I'd say somewhere around 45 to maybe 50 miles an hour. So for high wind warnings, we really want to see wind gusts well over 50 miles an hour for several hours. So we'll be able to cover that with the wind advisory. Same thing for Virginia Beach. The timing of the wind is still good. It's just we're knocking off a few miles per hour. So maybe you gust to 45 to 50, but gusts up to 55, that's probably not gonna probably happen. So let me kind of show you in the models. I'm looking at the different projections, and I think this is going to do a pretty good job at trying to show how this is playing out. And it's doing a good job right now, showing those wind gusts. The yellows kind of represent gusts getting into, upper 40s or so. So showing those winds here along the Eastern Shore and really along the Southeast Virginia coast down in North Carolina. And as we go through the day to day, you kind of see those stronger winds. They do try to pivot north. Kind of fill in the bay here. So by about, let's say, 1 or 2 o'clock, the winds could increase. I think we're going to maybe add a few miles per hour to what we have now, which, like I said, that's good wind advisory type criteria. Gusts maybe 45 to 50, and that's going to persist. That's 2 o'clock this afternoon, and it kind of continues on through a good bit of the afternoon. That's 4 o'clock. This gets us into about 5 o'clock, and then as you push through the evening, you're going to start to see things become a little bit more focused further to the north here, up over the Maryland Eastern Shore, just off the coast, and you'll see the winds starting to decrease. It's still breezy. Still gusts in the upper 30s to low 40s here. This is actually tonight by around 10 o'clock, but you definitely see the wind is kind of lingering up over the Eastern Shore a little bit longer. And eventually the winds is still like a breezy, but it starts to come down everywhere. I mean, with wind gusts maybe in the, like I said, low to mid 30s here at this point. And then as you push through, the winds definitely decrease some as you get in tomorrow morning. But then you'll see another little picket area wind right there as that low pressure system starts to kind of redevelop off the coast. These are getting wind gusts again back up around 35 to 40 miles per hour. And this is actually from Monday about 8 p.m. So you actually see the winds increasing again, kind of more from the north and the northwest. And you'll see that area green kind of expand right here across the Chesapeake Bay. I mean, this is now tomorrow evening. So maybe get a period here where we get some wind gusts, maybe getting back up to 35, 40 miles an hour, maybe even low 40s, rushing out the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay here, kind of this northwest wind as this area low pressure forms, just off the coast, this secondary low. So that's tomorrow evening. So again, might see a little bit of a break in the wind. They may decrease a little bit tomorrow, and then all of a sudden it ramps back up again in the evening. And then eventually this whole thing will kind of pivot down the coast and hopefully go away as we get into Tuesday. So a little bit of a messy system here. So we may end up having to bump up some of these winds for Monday. We'll see. This could be bumping up just a teeny bit, maybe having to add maybe 5 to 8 miles an hour to some of these winds for Monday afternoon and Monday evening. Obviously have to still have the high surf advisories in effect. The waves out there right off of Cape Henry are pushing about 12 feet. So it's pretty rough out there right now. So, that wave action is coming right into the beach. Very rough surf, very dangerous surf. A lot of dune erosion. Waves are running up to the dunes, especially as you get down south of Rudy Inlet and then down here towards Corova. In those areas, definitely seeing a lot of wave action running up the dunes or up to the dunes. Still have our coastal flood warning in effect, really for the entire Chesapeake Bay and our coastal water areas. We do have a coastal flood advisory here on the Maryland Bay counties for some lower water levels where we're having basically minor flooding, but moderate to around major for a lot of the rest of the area where the coastal flood warning is in effect. So here kind of breaks it down. The areas in purple there on the left is where we're going to make a run at maybe some major flooding, and the areas in red get it more into moderate. And then the orange areas is where we're going to see maybe some minor tidal flooding. We are going to have to watch this is the high tide this afternoon. I'm on the left. We're going to have to watch the high tide again this evening. The way the wind's playing out, it could be comparable to what we experienced this afternoon. Even though the astronomical tide's lower, the surge may continue to bump up a little bit. And then as we get into Tuesday, definitely the water levels are starting to come down quite a bit. Winds more northwest, blowing the water out the bay. So just some lingering tidal issues, mostly minor. And by the time we get into Wednesday, tide levels should be still elevated, but not like what we're seeing today and early tomorrow. So just looking at some of the tides, we are going to be looking at these and updating these, but we still think in the upper bay, especially Louisetta, Windmill Point, we're going to make a run close to major tidal flooding. It could be a little bit lower than this, but we're going to make a run close to major tidal flooding in those areas. Again, not so much when you get up towards like Bishop's Head's barely minor. Cambridge is just in the minor level. So more moderate to borderline major on the west side of the bay, up there in the northern bay, at Windmill Point and there at Louisetta. Moving down the bay a little bit, here at Sewell's Point, we're going to have to keep an eye on this. We've been forecasting 6.5 feet. I'll pull up Sewell's Point right now so we can kind of get a live picture of what's going on with the water levels right now. So this is Sewell Point as of right now. And you can tell that low tide, the low tide kind of did what it was supposed to do. We've made that turn. And so we're heading up towards maybe 6.5 feet. Tides could come in with the winds being a little bit less. The tide could be a little bit lower. It could be more like 6.2 feet, but I think we're good. I think the forecast is definitely within half a foot. Maybe it peaks out around 6, but it's going to get up there. And it could be able to make that run at 6.5 because you guys saw those winds are picking up a little bit out there, and it is gusting into the 40s with some big waves coming in the mouth of the bay. So we might be able to make a run at this. And this next high tide later tonight, I have to watch this as well. That's almost 6 feet. And we may end up having to bump that one up a teeny bit. So that may be more like 6.2. We'll see. But the winds, if they can last a good bit of this evening, that tide is going to be right around 6 feet. So we're going to have to watch these next two tides, and then the tides should start to decrease, after that. And I'm just kind of using Sewell's Point here as a proxy. Same thing here at Lynn Haven. It's going to react to this wind. Let's pull up Lynn Haven right now because that's some of the highest water levels that we're forecasting. So here's Lynn Haven right now, and you can see it's kind of making that run up towards maybe 6.2 feet. Could it top out around 6 feet or 5.9 maybe? It may just come in a little bit lower, but we've made that turn, like I said, and I think we're definitely going to head over 5.5 and get right around the ballpark of 6 feet, even here at Lynn Haven. And again, folks out there on the eastern side, out towards East Beach, Ocean View, that tide tonight is going to be very comparable. Maybe just a little bit lower, but it's almost going to be the same as the tide we're experiencing this afternoon. So just heads up watching that tide, during the early morning hours. It's going to kind of repeat itself out there a little bit. Kind of moving in towards Smithfield. Again, not kind of the similar. I'm not going to go through every single site, but Smithfield probably getting around, I'd say 4.8 to 5.2. So I think we're definitely going to get into a major tidal flooding there. The tide at Scotland Ferry and Smithfield's a little bit later, so the wind's picking up now, so that's going to allow those tides to build in the bay and push up the James River, also push up towards Yorktown. So we might see some of those higher water levels, further up the tidal rivers because the high tide's later, and it's going to allow more time for that water to build in. So I still think we're going to be making runs at major flooding here, both at Smithfield and at the ferry. And of course, here at Kipta Peak, closer to the mouth of the bay, probably going to make a run really close to major flooding as well. Getting on the ocean side of things, obviously Duck is pretty rough down there. We're going to have some pretty high water. We're seeing that 12-foot waves along with major flooding, so expect a lot of dune erosion down there. Chincoteague probably making a run here towards moderate. And Ocean City, let me pull up the Ocean City tides because we've been watching that one pretty close. I think that one, that one's just turned as well, kind of starting to get into a high tide. So let me pull that one up. So they were kind of on the curve. Like I said, we were forecasting it to get up right around 5 feet. It might peak out just a little bit lower, maybe somewhere around 4.7. So we're within maybe a few inches. It could just peak a little bit lower. But again, watch out for that tide again tonight, especially you folks up there, Waterpreek, Chincoteague, on up to Ocean City. That tide tonight could actually be a little bit higher than the one we're experiencing this afternoon. So just realize that curve, see that bump is a little bit higher here for later tonight than what we're going to experience, here this afternoon, and still a decent tide here, even along the East Coast, getting into the tide here on Monday. It's Monday afternoon, that tide there. So I'm on the marine side, shifting gears really quickly. We are going to be dropping the storm warning for the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. And actually, we're going to drop the storm warnings from Cape Charles south. So with the 11 o'clock update, which is coming out now, we'll have gale warnings in effect south of Cape Charles. And then we'll have storm warnings in effect north of Cape Charles. And the rest of the bay and the rivers remain in the gales because of the wind. So didn't quite get to those storm conditions because the low pressure system just hung up to the south. It did not move up here, but it's still going to be windy. We're going to have solid gale conditions, sustained gales with gusts of probably 45 to 47 knots or so as the afternoon wears on. So still very windy, still very dangerous marine conditions. We're just not going to see those frequent winds over 50 knots out there, that would warrant a storm warning. And we're just not going to quite get there. We're going to be close, but just not there. So that's why we're dropping the storm warnings south of Cape Charles. A little better chance with that low developing offshore north of Cape Charles that you might start to see some wind gusts of 50 knots offshore here off of the eastern shore of Virginia and offshore of the Maryland eastern shore. So we're keeping the storm warnings in effect up there. Just kind of playing this out day by day. The bottom line is you notice a lot of red here on the map, even here for Monday. So that represents a lot of gale conditions persisting a little bit into Tuesday, but things should be improving Tuesday for sure. But notice how the wind and the waves just kind of stay up. You keep some red on the map, especially orange. So small craft advisory to gale conditions continuing for quite some time. But by far, today is the worst a little bit into this evening. So we're slowly backing the winds down here. This was the wind forecast a little bit earlier. I think if we do see any wind gusts to 50 knots, it's going to stay, offshore. I think here at the mouth of the bay, again, I think winds here, getting into the low to mid 40s is fair, and that can be covered by the gale warning there with sustained gale conditions of 34 knots, maybe gusts of 45. And I think that's going to be the top of the mark for us as far as the marine conditions here at the mouth of the bay and even just east of the mouth of the bay. And you notice those winds stay up tomorrow. We may have to bump these winds up Monday evening. We'll have to keep an eye on this to see if we get that secondary surge. But some of these winds may stay up closer to 30 knots, 30 to 34 knots here. So we'll see how long we got to keep the gale warnings in effect. This is just showing you the wind probabilities, and this is another way of looking at things. And so the orange spike that you see here is the probability of us seeing 43 knot, let's say 43 to 45 knot peak winds there at the just east of Cape Henry. And you definitely see the probabilities increasing after about 8-10 o'clock today, peaking through this afternoon, and then the orange really starts to decrease and crash, especially once you get past about, I'd say, 10 o'clock or so. So we're going to have to watch out for this time period this afternoon. That's why we think the winds are still going to increase a little bit. You kind of see the purple even here, where it's a low probability of maybe some wind gusts of 48 knots bumping up here. And that peaks really around 4 to 6 p.m. So the winds are going to increase a little bit, but we don't think they're going to increase too much on us. Just looking at the sustained wind again versus your wind gust here. Sustained gales today with some wind gusts there in the I'd say low to mid 40s. We're shaving this off a little bit, maybe some gust of 50 just offshore. Wave heights, it's getting pretty dangerous out there. We are measuring 12 feet just east of Cape Henry. The waves are continuing to build out there. So I think 12 to 15 feet just outside the Capes is very fair, with getting up to 15 to 20 feet as you push further offshore. In fact, the buoy 60 miles east of Virginia Beach, the border there, was measuring, I think, about 19 feet an hour ago. So some pretty big seas out here. Out in the coastal waters, with the bay running about, I'd say, 6 to 7 overall. And again, some of your highest wave heights, pretty significant heights here, anywhere from 18 to 25 feet, maybe even getting up to 30 feet as you get off of the ocean city, getting offshore. So some pretty high maximum wave heights. The bay, probably seeing some good breaking waves, about 7 to 8 feet out there, maybe even 8 to 9 feet as you get a little bit further down in the lower bay with that strong east wind, a lot of breaking waves, very, very rough conditions. And the only thing I'll mention here, this is kind of showing a model wave plot there east of Cape Henry. And I'm kind of keying in on the 8-foot waves. And we really don't drop below 8 feet out there. I mean, we kind of do by Tuesday morning, but notice how the wave heights kind of bump back up there at about 8 feet and kind of hold 8 feet for a while. I mean, this is really right around 8-foot seas. And the seas really don't start to decrease until we get later on in the week. So the seas are going to remain really elevated out there. I say at least about 8 feet or higher there for a good bit of this week. It's going to take a while for these waves to actually come down. And of course, very, very dangerous here for today and even into tomorrow with some very significant wave heights. So that concludes our briefing for today.